Tracks Ahead, brought to you by Kalmbach Publishing Company, producers of an online source for rail-related information where you can discover model trains, toy trains, garden trains, and even real trains. Kato, manufacturer of precision railroad models, and the Unitrack system.
Hi, I'm Spencer Christian. On this episode of Tracks Ahead, we'll visit a huge high rail layout in our nation's capital. We'll talk with John Bromley, a railroader and artist, and we'll check out the 15-inch gauge trains at the Whiskey River Railroad. But first, one of the last major railroads ever built was the Trans-Australian Railroad. Let's take a trip across a continent on the Indian Pacific.
A ride on the Indian Pacific is one of the train trips of a lifetime.
Don't necessarily need to be a train buff to travel on the train. It's not about traveling on a train today, it is all about it being an experience, a holiday. Basically, it's almost like a hotel on wheels, and even though you spend 3 or 4 days on it, it is not wasted time.
It cuts through some of the most rugged country the world, let alone Australia, has to offer. But your trip begins in the stylish, booming, sophisticated city of Sydney. Sydney is one of the most instantly recognizable cities in the world. The harbor is a playground for all variations of water sports. Of course, the crown jewel of the view is the Sydney Opera House, a music-filled icon of the country. It's a city that manages a balance of modern and classic, with a point of departure like this old train station. It looks, frankly, the way a train station should look. This cavernous beauty is the spot where you step aboard the sleek Indian Pacific. After pulling swiftly from the station, it doesn't take long to notice a sharp change from metropolitan scenery to the lush countryside of the Blue Mountains. The whole journey from Sydney to Perth takes 3 days from coast to coast along these legendary rails. Perth nestles the coastline of the Indian Ocean. It's a city many Australians from the East Coast have never seen because it's so far away.
It's a very clean city, very friendly city. The people, you can walk around Perth and there's no problems with getting lost because if you just stop and ask anybody, they're very friendly. My personal opinion, it's one of the best climates. It's very mild winters, the summers aren't scorching hot, and they have something that's called the Fremantle Doctor, which is a breeze that comes off the ocean in the afternoon, cools the city down.
The breeze is also a favorite for windsurfers who catch some blistering rides on a rollicking Indian Ocean. In between these two great cities runs the Indian Pacific.
Well, the Indian Pacific it's an icon. It's, to start with, it's one of the, amongst the longest journeys, rail journeys within the world. It's unique, and we could say that there's not many trains like this left, not just within Australia, but in the world as well.
Along the way, there's the chance to stop and check out some of the far-flung towns of this vast country. Broken Hill is a mining town that's clinging to a more profitable past.
It's the doorway to the outback as well, because Broken Hill is only a day's drive or days travelling from major centres like Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide. There, as I said earlier, it is a mining town, but more so these days it's turning towards tourism. There have been many movies made in the area too, some of them like Mad Max and Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, so forth. I think they're well known.
It's one of the dots on the map served by the Flying Doctor Service, established in 1928. In a land where 911 is unknown and an ambulance is out of the question, these small planes show up with doctor aboard wherever and whenever medical help is needed, and it's free. The Outback relies on the service a lot.
20,000 emergency landings a year, and somewhere around 170 to 200,000 patients a year as well that they service.
You can travel the globe and never find a longer stretch of straight track than right here.
We're in the probably in the central of the Nullarbor at the moment. We're on the longest strait in the world. the straight being 479 kilometres long. As you can see, there's not a lot to see out here. A few odd kangaroos, a bit of wildlife, that's about it.
The word nullarbor means without trees, and in fact, it might just as well mean without anything. But then again, all of this, is far from being nothing. This nothing is exactly what people come from all continents to see.
There are many expressions that come on people's faces. Some are a great surprise, like especially for international visitors, particularly Americans and obviously our Japanese travellers. They are amazed at there are no buildings on any of this land in the middle of Australia. It's just dirt and trees, saltbush, that type of thing. And it just goes on forever.
In the middle of it all is Cook, a truly tiny town.
In past times, there used to be up to 200 people lived at Cook. Now there's only a caretaker, his wife, and 2 children, so the official population is 4.
Well, somebody suggested it would make a great retirement place. It would have a lot of peace and quiet, no stress. But shopping would be a bit difficult.
As wonderful as all the places out the window are, it's what's happening inside that makes this trip special.
It's a very pleasant way to get from one side of Australia to the other, and I think that, as I said, the best part of it is meeting different people and enjoying a good old chat with them. That's the best part of it, I think.
The people that travel on it and the people that work on it make it special. The people that you meet on the train make it special. As a train, it's like I said, it is unique, but I think the experience of what you see, hear, and people you meet on the journey makes it special.
Very good. We've had a ball. We've met some great people, some Americans and some expatriate English people, and we've had some good food, good wines, and good company, good scenery. It's been really good.
Eating is a main focus of the trip. The food is excellent and creative.
It's all fresh. All the food is prepared on board the train. We have qualified chefs in our restaurant. The raw product is brought onto the train and they prepare the meals from scratch. As you would have noticed last night yourself, we have quite an extensive menu, an extensive wine list as well. So it is fine dining in the middle of the outback, basically.
All the meals are prepared in this small galley. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner overlap in this compact area where the action never really stops.
We have some signature dishes on the train, one of them being the kangaroo. Did you have an opportunity to try that? Many people tend to sit back a little bit when they first read the menu, but it's something to experience for your taste buds, something different, and many people do try it for the first time and tend to enjoy it.
The wonderful food is just another element that makes this journey so memorable. It's the kind of expedition that has a way of getting under your skin. After a night asleep in your cabin, or perhaps your comfy coach seat, you settle into the trip. You roll with the rocking rhythm of the rails and enjoy a grand style of travel.
You forget that you have just come on a train to travel. It's not about that anymore. It's about gaining experiences, something that you'll remember forever and probably pass on to your children or friends or so forth. And we have many travellers that come back many times and ask them why, and they will just say, well, have a look for yourself.
A memory that will be everlasting, so that they can pass on to their family and friends and let them know how good it is to travel on the Indian Pacific.
Originally I joined the job to stay 12 months. It's 21 years, as I said now, and I asked myself sometimes, has it been that long? Time has really flown, and why I'm still here is, to start with, I could be sitting in an office maybe looking at the Sydney Harbour in Sydney or the Swan River in Perth, but after a while, the scenery's the same all the time. I think I've got the best office window here. The scenery changes all the time, the people we meet, and if people come and travel on the train, and when they walk off the train and they say, Michael, thank you very much for that experience, that's why I keep coming back anyway, and that's why I'm still here.
In the early days of the railroad, the trains used to stop in the straight section. Passengers would get off and pick wildflowers. If you're a model railroader, once in a while you sit back and daydream about the biggest and nicest layout you would build if you had the means. Right now we're going to meet a Maryland man who turned those dreams into reality.
When you walk into the layout room, the first thing that hits you is, wow, this is one of the most intricate and detailed layouts I've ever seen in my life. Everything is there that could be there, that should be there. There's constant action to keep your attention. There's detail upon detail, and it's huge. Here are a few of the numbers. It fills close to 3,000 square feet, which is about twice the size of the average starter home. That's 45 feet wide by 60 feet long. If you went outside and laid the track end to end, it would stretch out for over 1 mile. There are 9 separate transformers. There's a 13-stall roundhouse. There are 7,000 model trees. But there's one owner and chief operator, businessman Tony Lash.
Got my first train in Christmas of 1947, which I still have my original set. And every week I would buy a car, or I would lay away a car or engine or something like this. And I came from a railroad family. My grandfather and uncles all worked for the Norfolk and Western Railway. And that was how I fell in love with trains.
As an adult, Tony Lash would decide to base his dream layout on the West Virginia coal country he knew as a child.
I tried to model the area that I grew up with. I used to ride a 6YB when I was a young kid with the Norfolk and Western with my grandfather from Bluefield, West Virginia to Norfolk or to Hampton Roads, really. And hauling loaded coal cars down and empty coal cars back. And that was just a thrill, and it just got into my blood, and to smell the steam and to smell the smoke, and just to be able to feel the raw power of a 6YB is just something that I would never, never forget. It was an experience that I certainly appreciate being able to have when I was growing up.
The O-gauge rolling stock is from Mike's Train House, and as you can see, there's a lot of it. He likes the size, the detail, and the all-around quality.
I stuck with O-gauge because of my age. It's hard for me to put the HO on the track and to see all of the good detail. And I grew up with O-gauge.
Tony Lash had built a number of layouts as an adult, but when this business executive decided to build the biggest and the best, he knew he would need some help. Help with the bench work, the switches, the scenery, the signals. Help with just about everything. He and nearly 15 layout experts spent more than 3 years building this masterpiece. 3 years turning Tony's fantasy and vision into reality.
It was complex because it was large. I mean, the number 10 wire alone, I've got about 1.5 miles of that strung under here. So from the basics of how much work had to be done, there was a lot of man hours in it.
My part on the layout was about 1.5 years of 3-day weekends. I had a partner helping me at the time, so there were 2 of us here over that period. We used rock face. I use a water-soluble method using plaster cloth to give myself the basic design, and then attaching literally hundreds of rock molds to the plaster cloth using a spackling compound. As an adhesive, we were able to sculpt the verticals as well as give ourselves several crevices that add to real erosion look.
Tony and his pals have put together a realistic work of art, the kind that every model railroader dreams about, the definition of excellence.
Okay, are you ready for this? Tony Lash is actually thinking about putting an addition onto that building so he can make the layout even bigger and better. The eyes of an artist see trains in a romantic light. John Bromley has made trains his life, both on the canvas and off. Some of you might think this man has the perfect life, and perhaps you're right. Sometimes the dream of trains takes the shape of a basement layout. Sometimes it can take over your whole house. And every once in a while, the dream of trains explodes and becomes something big enough to call an amusement park.
When you have the urge to take a little train ride through some pretty Wisconsin countryside, you can literally take a little train ride. It's the Whiskey River Railway in Marshall, Wisconsin. This small steam train is the realization of one man's big dream.
I was always kind of fascinated with steam. You have to be fascinated, you wouldn't be full with it. I really got started in 1960 in Colorado, and then it just grew and grew and grew. And until now, it's quite a deal. I love it, of course I would, how could I not?
Lee Merrick is a successful businessman, but this operation is not about money, it's about fun.
Well, you see people coming, that's the thrill for me. People come and says, you're from Nebraska? Here's a guy just come up here from Illinois. I'm from Illinois. I call that home. I was born in New York, but I was raised in Illinois. And to see people come from someplace that I know and came here to look at this stuff, that's my thrill. That's the biggest thrill I get out of it.
The line follows 2.5 miles of 16-gauge track. Along the way, you'll find animals here and there, and also 2 depots, 3 grade crossings, a 150-foot tunnel, and a 4-stall roundhouse. But Merrick says he wasn't following any blueprints.
I don't know, it's just like anything else, you know, it just kind of grew, almost like a mushroom, you know, it just, you couldn't really explain it. We had all the setbacks you could possibly have, floods, fire, you have it all. And now we got all this, and it'd be hard to explain. Wasn't planned, it's just spontaneous.
On sweet summer or fall days like this, it's a joy to be out here in the country. Of course, the winter also has its fans. Right after Thanksgiving, you can hop aboard and head out for a Christmas tree.
Our winter activity is what gave this railroad its start some 17 years ago. The railroad traverses over 2 miles of Wisconsin countryside where people can travel and pick out a Christmas tree. Most of the trees are pre-cut, but in season we do have cut-your-own trees here at the railroad. On weekdays we run diesel service, and on weekends we run live steam. Some weekends we run up to 3 trains that'll take people like a bus service out to pick out their Christmas tree.
Darrell Klumpmaker is part of this dream of trains too. He's the guy who keeps these trains running.
Well, I've loved trains, park-sized trains, since I was a kid, of course, riding trains at amusement parks. Especially there's one called Saltzer's Kittyland in Indiana, and also the Sandley trains at Milwaukee County Zoo and up in the Wisconsin Dells, and was very much inspired by them, and used to play with the little HO train and pretend it was a park-sized train. Figured someday I was going to build one, and that's pretty much what brought me here.
The place is a kind of museum of classic park trains. Everywhere you look, there's something special.
This locomotive that I'm sitting by here, which we faithfully call a little engine that could, it's a small little Atlantic, but it was built in '69 by a gentleman by the name of Norman Gracie, and it ran at the Sanford Zoo in Florida. It was the first steam engine to be at this railroad here, and commonly a lot of these small railroads are 15-inch gauge, and this particular locomotive in that railroad there was 16-inch gauge, and that's what formed our railroad to be a 16-inch gauge railroad here in Marshall rather than the typical 15-inch gauge you see a lot of hobbyists building. The Oakland Acorn is the locomotive behind this locomotive. That locomotive was originally built, started in 1949 by George Reddington and with the help of Robert Blecka. And they built that locomotive and started a concession operation in Oakland Park. At that time, it was a very successful operation, and the cowboy actor Gene Autry was there and saw it and was so impressed by the train that he contracted with them to build the Gene Autry Melody Ranch Special Daylight, which is the Daylight locomotive, the sister engine to it right here. Incidentally, the Oakland Acorn started out looking identical to the Daylight. They are the exact same engine. To give you an example of how dress can change the way a locomotive looks. They are identical in every way except for a couple of small things with them.
Lee Merrick's dream started out with trains, but now it also includes an amusement park. There is always something new on the horizon here at Little America. Lee Merrick says he just can't seem to stop adding to his living dreams. But there is no plan. He says things just sort of happen and grow. No matter what comes next, you'll always be able to take a little train ride through some lovely Wisconsin scenery here at Little America.
This is the Feather River up in Northern California, a place called Sloat. What I did here was I just took a snapshot off of a little bridge that went over the river there, and then of course I didn't have a steam engine going by there, but I put one in from the 1940s era to round it off. Otherwise the scene is contemporary, including the coyote down in the lower right-hand side.
You can probably guess John Bromley's favorite period, the time when steam was still a powerful force and presented an artist with a full canvas of options.
My favorite era is, like a lot of fans I guess, was the 40s, 50s. I think because of the mix of steam and diesel, and of course all the great passenger trains on the British railroads were running in those days. Steam engines are an artist's dream because of you can do so much with the smoke and steam, and they all look so different. And it's fun to, you know, by placing the headlight up or higher or lower, or the marker lamps or whatever you've got, you can make a steam engine just do all kinds of marvelous things on canvas or on paper. And of course the smoke is just, you know, I think everybody loves to draw smoke. And the trick is to restrain yourself such these huge clouds of smoke at every painting you do.
His work captures classic trains in many settings. As a kid, he grew up in love with trains. Art school lasted only a little more than a year, but his passion for trains is still glowing.
Well, I almost became an artist when I graduated from high school. Majored in art at the University of Nevada in Reno. Always been drawing train pictures since I was a kid. And that developed into one thing or another. And of course, with like a lot of people, when you get to school, you really don't know what you want to do. I had started to go to work for the railroad in Las Vegas, Nevada. And my dad talked me out of it. Said he'd help me get started through college, and then after I finished college and I was dumb enough to go railroading, that would be my decision. But so I went off on the art direction, and that's what began my serious look at it, although really it's always been a hobby for me.
After a tour in the Navy, he worked in the media, which led to a career in public relations, and, as luck would have it, his love for trains is now part of his everyday life. John Bromley is the Director of Public Affairs for the Union Pacific Railway. So that would mean the UP is his obvious favorite, right?
Quietly, I always admired the Santa Fe. That's my big secret because I love their red war bonnet trains. But I was always loyal to the Union Pacific Railroad, and it was just a fluke of fate that I ended up in Idaho and met some folks up there that led me back into the railroad business.
Look around the UP offices in Omaha and you see his work there, and here.
Well, it's strange, and although I think I've gotten used to it, but it's a wonderful ego trip. I don't make any money at it. I wish I did, but for my own self, it's just wonderful. It kind of started out innocently enough, like everything does, where I did some Christmas cards for the company, and from the Christmas cards, a fellow here started a print business, and he still runs that, Rail History Prints, and that's kind of expanded my exposure where they sell overseas, and now we have my prints are all over this building. They're in many of our office buildings all over the system. Everywhere I go, I get off a train in Los Angeles and I walk in the building and there's one of my pictures. And the other thing it does is I meet people out on the system. They say, "Oh, you're John Bromley, and I've got one of your paintings." Or people, you know, call them up and ask them about how our fuel oil prices are doing. The guy said, "I just bought your latest print," and that's kind of it's fun for me.
For someone who grew up in love with trains, it just doesn't get much better.
John admits that it really is satisfying to look around the Union Pacific offices and see his artwork on the walls. Thanks for being with us, and please join us next time for more Tracks Ahead.
Tracks Ahead, brought to you by Kalmbach Publishing Company, bringing you Model Railroader magazine every month for over 65 years, and Garden Railways magazine, helping you take the fun of model trains outdoors. Kato, manufacturer of precision railroad models and the Unitrack system. Walthers, manufacturer and supplier of model railroading products, serving the hobby since 1932. The Model Railroad Industry Association, a not-for-profit trade group for professionals in manufacturing, importing, packaging, or publishing model railroad merchandise.